In the sleepy town of Clearwood, nestled between misty mountains and a sprawling forest, a peculiar silence hung over the streets. The usual hum of life, children laughing, doors creaking, cars idling, was replaced by an eerie stillness. As the first rays of sunlight painted the town gold, its residents stirred from their slumber with heavy eyes and a disorienting sense of loss. Each person awoke to a blank canvas. Their names, their families, their very identities all erased like chalk from a blackboard. They stared at the walls of their homes, the photos on their mantels, and the clothes in their wardrobes with no recognition. Who am I? Where am I? What has happened? The air felt heavy, not just with confusion, but with something more, an inexplicable weight, as if the town itself was holding its breath. A woman in her 30s, dressed in a loose sweater and jeans, wandered out into the street. Her name tag, pinned to her shirt, read Emily Carter, but the name meant nothing to her. She clutched the tag as if it could unlock her lost memories, her gaze darting from one empty street to another. "Is anyone there?" she called, her voice trembling. Doors began to creak open. One by one, men, women, and children emerged from their homes, each wearing the same expression of bewilderment. "Does anyone know what's going on?" asked a man in a flannel shirt. He held a coffee mug with the name Robert etched into it, but didn't know why he felt a pang of attachment to it. "No," Emily replied, her voice steadying, "but we need to figure it out." By noon, nearly every resident had congregated at the town square. It was a picturesque spot, a fountain at the center, benches lining cobblestone paths, and towering oak trees that swayed gently in the breeze. Yet, no one could recall its name. Emily, quickly emerging as a leader, climbed onto the fountain's edge. "We're all in the same boat," she began, her voice cutting through the murmur of the crowd. "No one remembers anything. Not their names, not their families, not even where we are. But if we're going to solve this, we need to work together." A man stepped forward. He was tall, with graying hair and a weathered face that suggested experience. "We should start with the basics," he said. "Who has any sort of clue? Notes, IDs, anything?" The townspeople began sharing their findings. Some carried wallets with driver's licenses, though the names and faces felt foreign. Others had phones with photos and contacts, but the devices were locked or dead. One boy, about 8 years old, held up a leather-bound journal. "I found this under my bed," he said, his voice timid. Emily took the journal and flipped through its pages. Inside were sketches, detailed drawings of faces, places, and objects. Beneath each sketch was a single word, like bridge, lake, or Sarah. "Does anyone recognize these?" Emily asked, holding the journal aloft. Heads shook, but there was a murmur of interest. The sketches seemed oddly familiar, like a melody half remembered. As the townsfolk gathered closer, Emily continued flipping through the journal. On the last page was something that made her pause, a hand-drawn map of the town. Buildings, streets, and landmarks were sketched with surprising detail, though the names of places were deliberately scratched out. At the center of the map, marked with an X, was a single word: remember. Emily traced her finger over the map, her brow furrowing. "This might be our first lead," she said. "If we can find this X, maybe we'll get some answers." The gray-haired man, who later found a wallet identifying him as Arthur Grant, stepped forward. "We can split into groups and search," he suggested. "Whoever drew this map knew something we don't." The crowd murmured in agreement, and soon small groups formed, each assigned a different section of the town to explore. Emily's group headed toward the eastern part of Clearwood, where the map indicated a cluster of buildings near the forest edge. The streets were eerily pristine, no litter, no signs of decay, and no hints of life before the amnesia. "Why does this place feel so empty?" asked a teenage girl named Sophia, who had a pendant around her neck engraved with initials she didn't recognize. "Because it's not just us who've forgotten," Emily replied, scanning the buildings. "It's like the town itself is holding its breath." The group stumbled upon a cafe with a sign that read Bella's, though the name felt meaningless to them. Inside, they found tables set with untouched mugs of coffee and pastries that looked freshly baked. "Is someone still here?" Sophia whispered. Before anyone could answer, the clock on the cafe wall began to chime once, twice, 3 times. The sound echoed unnaturally, as if coming from everywhere at once. Arthur's group, searching near the town hall, came across a peculiar scene. In the basement of the hall was a massive vault with a keypad lock. On the wall next to it was scrawled a message in faint, hurried handwriting. "Time is slipping. Find the key before it resets." "What does that mean?" asked a man named Mark, whose only memory was a recurring image of a beach he couldn't name. Arthur examined the keypad. "Whatever's in here must be important," he said. "But we'll need a code, and I have no idea where to start." As the groups regrouped in the square, a boy named Ethan approached Emily with wide eyes. "I remembered something," he exclaimed. The crowd fell silent. "I was standing near the lake, and I saw a swing tied to a tree branch," Ethan said. "I don't know why, but I knew I'd been there before. I could almost feel it, the wind, the sound of the water." Emily placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "That's a start," she said. "Maybe the key to remembering lies in places or objects we've connected with before." As night fell, the townsfolk returned to their homes, or at least the homes they assumed were theirs. But sleep didn't come easily. Dreams, or perhaps fragments of memories, flickered like old film reels in their minds. Emily dreamed of a man's voice calling her name. She couldn't see his face, but the tone was warm and familiar. When she awoke, her heart was pounding and a single word lingered in her mind: Ashwood. Meanwhile, Sophia dreamt of running through the forest, chasing a shadow she couldn't catch. When she awoke, her hands were clutching the pendant tightly, as if it held the answers she sought. By morning, the journal's map was their only lead. But as they prepared to search further, a new discovery threw everything into chaos. At the town's entrance, where no one had thought to look before, a sign now stood tall. It read, "Welcome to Clearwood. Population 47. You've been here before." The sign loomed like an accusation, its words sinking into the hearts of the townspeople as they gathered around it. "You've been here before. Does this mean we've lived here before?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or does it mean something else?" "Who put this here?" Arthur demanded, examining the post. The paint looked fresh, the wood unweathered, as if the sign had only just been erected. Sophia frowned, clutching her pendant. "It doesn't make sense. If someone else knows about us, why wouldn't they just tell us what's going on?" "It's a warning," Emily said. "Or maybe a clue." She traced her finger over the words, as if touching them might unlock their meaning. As the group debated the sign's origins, a figure emerged from the morning mist. He was tall, dressed in a dark coat, and carried an air of quiet authority. His eyes scanned the crowd, calculating but calm. "Who are you?" Emily called out, stepping forward. The man tilted his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "And someone who remembers," he said cryptically. The crowd erupted into whispers. "He remembers? How? Why?" Arthur pushed through the throng. "If you know what's happening, tell us." The man raised a hand to silence them. "Answers won't come all at once. But I can tell you this. You're not here by accident. And this isn't the first time you've forgotten." "What does that mean?" Emily pressed. The man's gaze settled on her. "You'll understand soon enough. But first, you need to find the vault key." The mention of the vault sent a ripple of urgency through the crowd. They split into teams once more, combing the town for anything that resembled a key. The journal, with its sketches and cryptic clues, became their guide. Emily's group ventured into the forest, following a path marked on the map. The trees seemed older than time itself, their gnarled roots curling like fingers around forgotten secrets. "What do you think he meant about this not being the first time?" Sophia asked as they walked. Emily shook her head. "I don't know, but if we don't figure it out, it might not be the last time either." The path ended at a small clearing where a dilapidated cabin stood. Ivy crawled up its walls and the windows were clouded with dust. Inside, they found a room filled with peculiar objects: a broken compass, a rusted music box, a diary with blank pages. Sophia picked up the music box, her hands trembling. When she wound it, a haunting melody filled the air. The sound tugged at something deep within her, and she gasped. "I know this song," she whispered. It's my mother's lullaby." Emily looked at her, a mixture of awe and concern on her face. "Maybe the key isn't a literal key," she said slowly. "Maybe it's something we've lost, something we need to remember." Back at the town hall, Arthur's group had made a startling discovery. Behind a false wall in the basement, they found a box filled with old photographs. Each picture was labeled with a date, but the faces were smudged beyond recognition. "What is this?" Arthur muttered, sifting through the photos. One of them showed a group of people standing in front of the town's fountain. Their faces blurry, but their postures familiar. Mark pointed to a figure in the corner of the photo. "Isn't that the man who came to the square today?" Arthur's grip tightened on the photo. "It can't be." That night, as the townspeople shared their findings, Emily noticed something she hadn't seen before. In the journal, beneath the map, were faint markings that only became visible under the flicker of candlelight. It was a single line of text. "When the clock strikes 12, remember who you are." Emily stared at the faint message in the journal, her heart pounding. "When the clock strikes 12, remember who you are." She gathered the townsfolk in the square and shared the revelation. Excitement mixed with apprehension as they prepared to face midnight, hoping it would bring answers. As the clock tower loomed overhead, its hands crept closer to 12. The air grew heavy, the silence oppressive. Emily clenched the journal, standing at the fountain, while the others waited in tense anticipation. The clock struck. The first chime echoed through the square. Nothing happened. By the fourth chime, murmurs began spreading through the crowd. "Is this some kind of trick?" Mark asked. But on the 12th chime, a sudden gust of wind swept through the square. The fountain's water rippled violently, and the ground beneath their feet seemed to hum. A brilliant light erupted from the clock tower, illuminating the town. The light engulfed each person, and for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. Then the visions began. Emily saw herself as a child, running through a field of wildflowers. Her parents' laughter echoed around her, but their faces were blurred. She felt the warmth of their love, the sting of their absence. Sophia saw a room filled with bookshelves, her hands tracing the spines of well-worn volumes. A man's voice, deep and kind, whispered, "Never stop dreaming, my little scholar." Arthur saw a factory, the hum of machines filling the air. He stood beside a woman with soft eyes and a determined smile. She handed him a lunchbox, her lips mouthing a silent promise. "We'll build a life together." One by one, fragments of their pasts began to surface, not as full memories, but as flashes of emotion, sound, and color. When the light faded, the townsfolk were left trembling, clutching at the pieces of their lives. Emily collapsed onto the fountain's edge, the journal slipping from her grasp. What was that?" Arthur asked, his voice unsteady. "It was us," Emily said, her voice barely audible. "Pieces of who we used to be." "But why just pieces?" Sophia asked, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Why can't we remember everything?" Before anyone could answer, the mysterious man reappeared, standing at the edge of the square. "Because the truth is dangerous," he said. The crowd turned to face him, their confusion turning to anger. "Dangerous?" Emily demanded. "We deserve to know who we are and what's happening to us." The man's expression darkened. "You don't understand. This isn't the first time this has happened. Every time you remember, the same cycle begins. And every time it ends in disaster." "What disaster?" Arthur asked, stepping forward. The man hesitated, then pointed toward the forest. "That cabin you found, it's not just a place. It's a gateway. Every time someone enters it with the wrong intent, it resets everything. Your memories, the town, everything." Emily's mind raced. "Then how do we break the cycle?" The man's gaze was piercing. "You can't. Not without understanding the cost." Despite the man's warning, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the cabin held the key to their freedom. Gathering a small group, she led them back into the forest under the cover of night. The cabin seemed different this time, its windows glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. Inside, they found the music box still playing its haunting tune. But now, the blank pages of the diary were filled with writing. Emily picked it up, her hands shaking as she read aloud. "To break the cycle, the truth must be faced. But beware, for the truth demands a sacrifice." Sophia's pendant began to glow, its light pulsing in time with the music box's melody. She clutched it, her eyes wide. "What's happening?" "The pendant, it's connected to this," Emily said. "Maybe it's the key." Arthur frowned. "But what does it mean by a sacrifice?" Before anyone could answer, the cabin began to shake. The walls groaned and the floorboards buckled. A voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. "Do you dare to remember?" The voice reverberated through the cabin, demanding an answer. "Do you dare to remember?" Emily looked at her companions, her mind racing. The pendant around Sophia's neck glowed brighter, casting shifting patterns of light across the cabin walls. "We have to," Emily said firmly, gripping the journal. "If we don't, we'll stay trapped in this cycle forever." "But what if the sacrifice is one of us?" Arthur asked, his voice trembling. "What if it's something worse?" Sophia swallowed hard, her hand clutching the pendant. "If it's the only way to break free, then we don't have a choice." Emily nodded, stepping forward. "We'll do it." The voice responded, its tone almost amused. "So be it." A section of the cabin's floor dissolved into mist, revealing a staircase leading downward. The group exchanged uncertain glances before descending. The air grew colder as they moved deeper into the earth. The staircase opened into a cavern filled with strange, glowing symbols etched into the stone walls. At the center stood a pedestal, atop which rested a shimmering orb. "What is it?" Sophia whispered, drawn to the orb's hypnotic glow. Emily approached cautiously. "It looks like it's alive." As she reached out to touch it, the orb pulsed with light, and a voice spoke again. "The truth lies within. But to claim it, you must give what is most dear." The moment Emily's fingers brushed the orb, the cavern was engulfed in light. Each member of the group found themselves alone, standing before a reflection of themselves. Emily's reflection spoke first. "You've always been the one to lead, haven't you? But are you willing to lead them into danger to find the truth?" Sophia's reflection held the pendant, its glow mirrored in her own eyes. "This belonged to someone you loved. Are you ready to give it up, knowing it may be the only connection you have left to them?" Arthur's reflection stood with arms crossed. "You've always been the protector. But what if protecting them means letting go of your own fears?" Each question cut deeply, forcing them to confront their hidden doubts and desires. When the light faded, the group stood together again. The orb's glow had dimmed, and the cavern felt heavier, as if the air itself mourned. "What did it show you?" Arthur asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily looked at the orb, then at her friends. "It showed me that the sacrifice isn't just one thing, it's everything we hold on to. Our fears, our doubts, even the things we think define us." Sophia's pendant began to hum, its glow intensifying. Tears welled in her eyes as she unclasped it. "This is my sacrifice," she said, placing it on the pedestal. Arthur followed, removing a small, worn badge from his pocket. "And this is mine," he said quietly. Emily hesitated before pulling the journal from her bag. It had been their guide, their anchor in a sea of uncertainty. But now, she placed it beside the pendant and badge. The orb absorbed their offerings, glowing brighter with each addition. The cavern began to tremble, the symbols on the walls pulsing in unison. A wave of energy surged outward, and the group was engulfed in a kaleidoscope of memories. They saw themselves in the town, living lives full of joy, sorrow, love, and loss. They saw the first time the cycle began, the choices that led to it, and the tragedies that followed. When the vision ended, they were back in the square. The townspeople surrounded them, their faces filled with hope and curiosity. "What happened?" Mark asked. "Did you find the truth?" Emily smiled, a weight lifted from her shoulders. "We found ourselves." As the sun rose over Clearwood, the town seemed different, brighter, more alive. The fountains sparkled in the morning light, and the air buzzed with a sense of possibility. The mysterious man watched from a distance, a satisfied smile on his face. "Perhaps this time," he murmured, "they'll break the cycle for good." The townspeople began rebuilding their lives, forging new connections and rediscovering old ones. They knew the past would always be a part of them, but now it was a foundation, not a prison. And in the center of the town, the clock tower stood tall, its hands pointing to a new beginning. The end,